Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Walking on the Cloud with Marco. Today, we're going to talk about AWS certification and essentially how important it is for you and your role and how to figure that out. So starting off, I get a lot of questions. Should I get certified, right? Is a certification that proves whatever it proves, something that I need for my job, to do my job, right? Well, with AWS, it's a little different because what you have to know is that AWS was designed as a self-service architecture from the get-go. So in 2006, they decided, well, anybody who knows how to build a web application can come along on our platform and just provision services for themselves, right? There's nothing special really there, but that was 2006, right? And it's 2020 now, so yeah. It's been a long time since that was true, right? So what happens now is there's so many services that they're sort of designed to be compliant with a certain area. They fit into a certain area of knowledge. They fit into a certain business area and cover a certain specific business need. There are a ton of services, and nobody is going to be an expert on anything, on everything. Right? Nobody can be an expert on all AWS services. So what I usually advise any students of mine or anybody who's asking a question whether they should get certified is, sure, what's your role? What kind of business case do you have for using AWS? And how much experience do you already have with AWS? Right? Those are three key questions, because the first thing you have to know about the certification is it doesn't verify whether you attended a course. It doesn't look at whether you were on an architecting on AWS or a SysOps course or any other course. It looks at whether you have the knowledge that would be expected from an architect, from a SysOps engineer, from a developer, from a DevOps engineer, etc. Right? Well, that means that each AWS certification has a sort of general rule tied to it saying you have to have at least this much experience, right, with AWS before you should be attempting this certification. So essentially, when you're looking at the associate level certifications, well, we can start with Cloud Practitioner. I think Cloud Practitioner is a good exam to take because it has a very broad area of coverage, right? You sort of have to be a jack of all trades, master of none. You just have to know about these services and what they do. You don't need to know service limits. You don't need to know specifics, right? But you do need to know what SQS does, what an EC2 instance is, what a S3 bucket is, etc. Right? Those are sort of crucial to being able to pass that exam, because without the knowledge required, you're just going to be stuck there and you're not going to pass the exam, right? And also you get an idea of the exam format. So it gives you a little bit more confidence for all the other exams. Don't measure the difficulty of the Cloud Practitioner exam as a rule for the difficulty of the next level, right? Because the difficulty does escalate. So when we're looking at the associate tier, we have three different certifications. We got the SysOps engineer, we got the architect, and we got the the developer associate, right? These three tiers essentially talk about, do I have the skill to use services that are tied to my role as a developer, as a SysOps engineer, as an architect. So as an architect, you're going to focus mostly on just building out infrastructures. It's mostly focused on traditional style architectures, and has a little bit of migrating. And of course, you have to be very much aware of the AWS well-architected framework. When you look at the SysOps role is all about knowing what the services do and how to monitor them, how to troubleshoot them eventually, right? You don't really need to know how to configure them or how to design the services themselves, but as far as knowledge area goes, it's pretty similar to to the practitioner exam. And then we have the developer. Now the developer certification, of course, is now mostly focused on serverless architectures. It's mostly focused on how to develop cloud native applications It's got a factor of containerization, but of course that doesn't mean you don't need to know anything about traditional architectures, right? So you still have to know how to lift and shift migrate an application from a physical server to a virtual machine on EC2. Those are definitely required areas of knowledge. These exams are not that difficult to pass. They require about a year's worth of experience in AWS. And of course, if you've taken a course like, for example, architecting or developing or sysops engineering on AWS, those are not going to be sufficient to pass the exam, right? Those courses are meant to kickstart your journey into AWS. They're meant to push you in the right direction, and that's all they do. They don't verify whether you were attending the class, right? They don't force you to go to the class, but it is going to shorten your time to getting certified for sure if you need to get certified. Now the question that we had in the beginning is, do I need to get certified? Well, that's a really good question where you have to understand that there are multiple factors. Like, for example, if you're changing jobs, right? If you're changing jobs, having a certification on your resume is definitely going to make you pop out from all the candidates, from all the other candidates. Having multiple certifications of multiple tiers, for example, is definitely going to give you an advantage. You're going to gain more visibility across the board. And of course, some businesses actually require their new hires to have a certification for AWS before they let them loose on AWS, which is sort of a catch-22, right? How am I supposed to get on-the-job experience if I need on-the-job experience to get certified, right? Okay, so now you've passed the associate tier. Now you're looking to get up higher to the professional tier, right? So we got the architect professional and we have a DevOps engineer professional, right? So architect professional is an upgrade to your architecting on AWS and expect you to have about 2 years of experience on AWS to be able to pass that one. Same goes for the DevOps engineer. It's an upgrade to SysOps and developing certification, and it really focuses on DevOps itself, on the DevOps tools, on the DevOps architectures, on how do we implement DevOps in AWS, right? It necessarily does not, you necessarily do not need to have AWS tool experience. You just have to have general DevOps experience, how to deploy applications, how to automate, and of course it's going to talk a lot about the automation tools that are available in AWS. It's going to talk a lot about putting security into DevOps, right? As one of my colleagues recently said, if you do not have security in your DevOps process, you're not a DevOps shop. You're not a DevOps engineer if you don't know anything about security, right? Security is such an essential part now of all IT, just generalizing here, that it's crucial to have it in the DevOps process. But we'll talk more about that in another video. Then of course, after we've gone through the professional tier, where I think there's another certificate that's gonna sort of be in there sooner or later, is going to be a developer professional, because there is a advanced developer course on AWS, and I think that there needs to be a developer professional sort of certification that, and I think AWS is planning that. But again, this is hearsay, so it's just my perspective. So nothing confirmed here. Then we have the specialty tier. Now the specialty tier focuses on very narrow areas in AWS. I'm going to talk about the current specialty tiers. There are going to be changes in the specialty tier. The big data tier is moving to a data specialty tier. The new tiers are coming along, like the Alexa skill builder or machine learning, etc. All of those, except for the networking specialty, have a course also. I'm not sure about Alexa. Anyway, all of these specialty tiers do have a course, but again, the course does not really prepare you for the certification. It just opens up the knowledge areas so that you can start learning all about the certification. So for me, the easiest one was actually security, the security specialty certification. Why was that easy for me? Well, because I had spent a lot of the time in SysOps sort of roles and I really was focused on security during my sysops times. I implemented security in many different companies. I worked with firewalls, I've worked with IPS, IBS devices, I worked with DDoS protection units and things like that. So security is right up my alley. So that was easy for me, right? It takes the AWS best practices and quizzes you on whether you have the required knowledge to configure your environment according to the AWS best practices. That's basically what it does. Now, the other two certifications, the other two specialty certifications that I have achieved, one was big data. Now, big data for me was the hardest because with big data, I never really worked with big data before in practice. So coming up to big data, I just started learning about all the technologies, about how to work with work with these machine learning tools that are mentioned in big data, etc. Right? If it was the database certification which is coming up, it would be well within my knowledge areas. But the big data was really had a wide scope, right? So everything from ingestion to different types of databases to actually processing that to actually integrating with certain tools, and you had to know what certain tools do. A lot of open source tools there because you are using Hadoop and big data a lot. So those are tools that I didn't really work with, and because I didn't work with those tools a lot, I did some log analysis with simple SQL. I did work with a team that was processing very, very high volume OLTP transactions from a huge database, well, feeding into a huge database cluster from a food processing plant, etc. Right? But those essentially prepare you. I mean, to pass the big data exam, you had to have a very, very broader knowledge. So that was just difficult for me. And then I also passed the network specialty. Now, network specialty, if you're a network engineer, if you are working with VPNs, if you're working with BGP routing, if you're working with your AWS environment and building it into a hybrid environment, that's easy to pass for you, right? So for me, it wasn't that difficult because I had a lot of experience with VPNs. I had a lot of experience with link aggregation and things like that on the networking side. I don't really have a lot of experience with networking itself. I would never said that I'm a network engineer. The only certifications that I ever got as far as networking is concerned were for some specialty switches. I think I had some Arista stuff, and then I had some Palo Alto certifications. But those do require you to have quite a broad knowledge of networking tools also, right? So networking wasn't that difficult for me. But it is a very, very detailed exam, right? It goes into a lot of detail. You need to know your IP addressing schemes. You need to know your the way things work in AWS. Wow, that is something really cool up there. Look at that tree, how it collapsed. Look at that. That stump is wedged right in between all the other trees. That is pretty cool. Anyway, hopefully that's visible to the camera because I really didn't see where I was pointing the thing. All right, so I'm gonna end the video here and I'm gonna say, do you need to get certified? It's up to you, but I definitely will tell you that there are benefits to being certified. You are much more visible in the crowd if you are certified, even though certifications are common. Any kind of certification is going to give you a lot of visibility. I've had over 50 different certifications. I don't even count them anymore in my career, in my 20 years. So it's always been at least sort of a booster of getting work, getting a project. Oh, you're certified. Yeah, good. It's good. If you're certified, it's good. Even for certifications that don't really matter, it has made a difference. So I'm gonna say that, yeah, get certified. Definitely get certified. And then in the next episode, we're gonna talk about jobs. When you are certified, we're gonna talk about AWS jobs in particular. So yeah, that's all from this episode of Walking on the Cloud with Marco. I will see you next time. Bye.